Never supposed to hear this. Not because it's fiction, but because it isn't. Because somewhere between the sound of water touching the shore and the silence that follows, there are things that watch back, things that wait. And once you understand what you're about to hear, you won't look at the ocean the same way again. Listen carefully. There's a reason ancient civilizations feared the sea, not respected it, feared it. They didn't build their temples facing it by accident. They weren't worshiping it, they were warning each other. Because the shoreline is not a boundary, it's a meeting point. And sometimes something crosses over. This story begins like all the others do, innocent, ordinary, predictable. A group of young men, a summer weekend, freedom without supervision, the illusion of control. You've lived that moment in some form, or you've craved it. That's how it starts. Not with darkness, but with comfort. Because comfort lowers your guard. 3 friends, 16, 17, that fragile age where you think you understand the world, but the world hasn't revealed itself yet. They drove down laughing, careless, alive in the way only youth can be. Music loud, jokes stupid, the kind of happiness that feels permanent until it isn't. A beach house, isolated enough to feel private, but not empty. That's important, because isolation doesn't create danger, it reveals it. The layout of the house mattered more than they realized. Doors, entrances, access points, pathways in and pathways out. Most people never think about these things. They assume safety is the default. It isn't. Safety is constructed, and anything constructed can be studied, memorized, broken. Behind the house, the lagoon stretched out like a black mirror, calm, quiet, deceptively still. Water like that plays tricks on your mind. It makes you believe nothing is moving, when in reality, everything is. And across that narrow channel, other houses, other docks, other entry points, other eyes. You see, what they didn't understand yet, what most people never understand, is that proximity creates opportunity, not just for you, for anyone watching. That night wasn't random. That's the part that should disturb you. It only felt random because you weren't there to see the beginning, only the moment when everything slipped and something decided to move. The night didn't feel dangerous. That's how control works. It never announces itself. It disguises itself as freedom. They had everything they thought they needed: privacy, alcohol, smoke drifting lazily into the warm air, laughter echoing off the water. 6 bodies submerged in a glowing pool, convinced they were alone in the world. The kind of moment people chase for years, not realizing those are the moments when they're most exposed. Because attention drops, awareness fades, and patterns become predictable. They weren't just relaxing, they were broadcasting. Sound carries over water, light reflects, movement silhouettes itself against darkness. Without realizing it, they had turned themselves into a signal, visible, readable, easy to study. And somewhere across that lagoon, something was already watching. Not randomly, patiently. You need to understand this. Predators, human or otherwise, don't rely on chaos. They rely on observation. They learn routines. They wait for repetition. They wait for certainty. And those boys, they were giving it away piece by piece. The same laughter, The same positions, the same careless exposure. No one scanning the darkness, no one questioning the silence beyond the music. Until the music stopped. That moment, when Charles reached over and cut the sound, it wasn't just instinct, it was interruption, a break in the illusion, because silence reveals what noise hides. And suddenly, the world shifted. You've felt that before, even if you can't explain it, that subtle change in atmosphere, the way your body reacts before your mind catches up. The way something deep inside you whispers, "Pay attention." Charles wasn't joking. He wasn't guessing. He saw something. A shape on the dock across the lagoon, still, upright, watching. Now here's where most people make their first mistake. They rationalize. It's nothing. Someone lives there. It doesn't matter. That's what one of them said. That's what you would probably say. Because the human mind is trained to reject discomfort, to smooth over anomalies, to preserve the illusion of safety. But Charles knew something the others didn't. That house was supposed to be empty, and that changes everything. Because now you're not looking at a neighbor, you're looking at a presence that shouldn't exist. And when something appears where it doesn't belong, it's never accidental. The girls felt it first. Fear doesn't need logic, it just needs a signal. And the signal was clear. Something was wrong. But wrong doesn't always mean immediate danger. Not yet. Because whatever was standing across that water wasn't moving. It was waiting, watching, calculating. And in that moment, the balance shifted. They thought they had time. They thought they could just go inside, lock the doors, forget what they saw. But they misunderstood something critical. They thought they had been noticed. What they didn't realize is that they had been studied long before that moment ever happened. And what they were seeing now wasn't the beginning. It was the signal that something had already decided to act.
It doesn't arrive all at once. It leaks in, slow, subtle, almost polite at first, like a knock you can choose to ignore. They stepped out of the pool, water dripping from their skin, laughter fading into something thinner, something uncertain. The air felt different now, heavier, charged, as if the night itself had shifted its attention toward them. And still, part of them resisted, because accepting fear means accepting vulnerability. And no one at that age wants to feel small. They grabbed towels, trying to act normal, trying to keep control of a situation that had already slipped beyond them. You've done that before, pretended everything was fine, just to avoid the weight of what you were actually feeling. But reality doesn't care about your performance. It waits for your attention. Riley was the one who broke next. A sudden flinch, a curse under his breath, his body reacting before his mind could filter it. That's the thing about instinct. It bypasses logic entirely. It doesn't ask permission. It just tells you, look. And when they all turned back toward the lagoon, the darkness answered. Movement. Not imagined, not uncertain, real. Something shifting where nothing should be shifting. Now the mind has no choice but to engage. No more jokes, no more dismissal, just raw, silent focus. Every eye locked onto that distant dock, trying to extract meaning from shadows. And then it happened. A passing car somewhere behind them cast just enough light across the water, just enough illumination to tear the veil for a fraction of a second. And in that fraction, they saw the truth. Not one figure, four. Tall, still, aligned at the edge of the dock, like something placed there with intention, not moving, not reacting, just facing them, watching. There's something deeply unnatural about stillness in a human form. Movement feels alive. Stillness like that feels deliberate, controlled, as if motion itself is being withheld. That's what broke them. Because now this wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a formation. 4 figures, positioned, aware, and focused entirely on them. No waving, no shouting, no attempt to be seen as normal, just presence. And presence like that carries a message. We see you. That's when fear stops being a possibility and becomes a command. Go inside, now. Charles didn't suggest it, he ordered it, because something ancient had just awakened inside all of them, the part of the human mind designed to recognize when you are being hunted. And they moved.
The sound is what stayed with them. Not the sight, not the fear, the sound. Because the human mind can rationalize what it sees, but it struggles to survive what it hears in the dark. They were halfway to the door when it happened. One splash, then another, then another, then another. 4 distinct entries into the water, clean, deliberate, spaced just enough apart to remove any doubt. Not accidents, not slips, intentional movement, closing distance. You have to understand what that does to the mind. There's a difference between being watched and being approached. Observation can be ignored, distance can be justified, but movement is commitment. Movement means a decision has been made, and in that moment, the illusion shattered completely. Those figures weren't just watching anymore, they were coming. Panic doesn't feel like chaos from the inside. It feels sharp, focused, violent in its clarity. Every unnecessary thought disappears, leaving only one directive: get inside, survive. They rushed through the sliding door, hands slipping, bodies colliding, voices breaking into screams that didn't even sound human anymore. Riley slammed the glass shut with shaking hands, fumbling the lock like his fingers no longer belonged to him. Charles ran to the front door, locking it. Too late or just in time? That's the question that never leaves you. Because once you've crossed into fear like that, time stops behaving normally. Seconds stretch, silence thickens, every tiny sound becomes amplified, weaponized against your nerves. They retreated to a room hidden from outside view. No windows, no direct line of sight. It felt safer, but safety in moments like this is mostly psychological, and psychology can be manipulated. They waited, listening. Nothing. No splashing now. No voices. No footsteps. Just silence again. And that's where it gets worse. Because silence after action doesn't mean nothing is happening. It means something is happening. Quietly, deliberately, closer than you think. Minutes passed, or what felt like minutes. It could have been less. It could have been more. Time fractures under pressure. And then a realization. Small, stupid, devastating. Riley's voice cut through the room, thin and breaking. I didn't lock the upstairs deck door. You can feel that moment, can't you? That drop in the stomach, that instant replay of everything you should have done, but didn't.
the understanding that your safety was never complete, that you left something open, and now something else might be inside. Fear doesn't spike in that moment. It sinks, heavy, cold, certain. Because now the threat isn't outside anymore. It's potential, somewhere above them, connected by a staircase, an open access point, waiting to be used. And right on cue, they heard it. Soft, measured, footsteps, above them. Not running, not searching, walking, like whoever it was wasn't in a hurry, like they already knew exactly where they were going. And that's when survival instinct made the final decision for them. Not to hide, not to wait, but to run. Because deep down, something inside,
They didn't grab anything. Not phones, not wallets, not even shoes. Because when fear reaches a certain level, ownership disappears. Nothing matters except distance. They burst through the front door like something was already behind them, like the air itself was chasing them out, bare feet slamming against pavement, lungs tightening, vision narrowing into a single objective, the car. The only escape they could understand, the only illusion of control left. Riley fumbled the keys, hands shaking so badly it looked like his body was rejecting coordination entirely. That's what Rio fear does. It doesn't make you stronger. It strips you down, exposes how fragile control really is. Behind them, nothing. No footsteps, no shouting, no visible pursuit. And that silence again, it followed them, clung to them, like whatever had entered that house didn't need to rush, because it already had what it wanted. Or worse, it knew they weren't going far. The engine roared to life, louder than it had ever sounded before. Riley slammed the car into reverse without thinking, tires screeching against concrete, the vehicle jerking backward with violent urgency. And then, impact, a crack, wood splintering, the mailbox, destroyed instantly, reduced to debris under blind panic. But they didn't stop. They couldn't, because in that moment, consequences didn't exist, property didn't exist, even logic barely existed. Only movement, forward, away, escape. That's all that remained. They tore out of the driveway, speed building faster than Riley could handle, the road bending under a driver who wasn't fully present anymore. He wasn't navigating, he was fleeing. And here's the part that most people overlook. They never saw anyone come out of the house. No figures chasing them, no silhouettes in the doorway, nothing. Just an empty frame of darkness where something had just entered. Which means one of two things. Either whoever was inside didn't care that they left, or they expected it. Think about that. If the goal was confrontation, they would have followed. If the goal was harm, they would have pursued. But they didn't, because maybe that was never the objective. The police came later. Of course they did. By the time authority enters a situation like this, the event is already over. All they can do is document the aftermath, reconstruct fragments, pretend control was always possible. But control is an illusion built after the fact. When they returned to the house, escorted, shaken, trying to piece together what had just happened, they found the truth waiting for them. Not chaos, not destruction, precision. Everything of value on the top floor, gone, clean, efficient, targeted, no random damage, no unnecessary movement, just removal. Like someone had walked in, followed a plan, and executed it without hesitation. And then came the detail that changes everything. The boat. Gone. Not just stolen, used, taken as an exit strategy. And not just any boat, the family's own vessel, which raises a question most people are too distracted to ask. How did they know it was there? But more importantly, how did they know how to use it? And even deeper than that, how did they know exactly where to find the spare key? Because that kind of knowledge doesn't come from observation alone. That kind of knowledge comes from familiarity, from proximity, from someone who already understood the system before the night ever began. And that means something far more disturbing than a random break-in. It means this wasn't just an attack from the outside. It was a breach from within the edges of their world, something close enough to study them long before they ever noticed it. And once you understand that, the fear changes.
The official story was simple. Too simple. A break-in, a robbery, unknown suspects, case unresolved, filed away, forgotten. That's how systems protect themselves, not by solving everything, but by labeling it fast enough that no one asks better questions. Because better questions lead to uncomfortable answers, and uncomfortable answers expose patterns. The police said it was likely someone familiar with the house, someone who knew the family was away, someone who understood where valuables were kept and how to leave without being caught. A logical conclusion, clean, contained. But logic, when applied too neatly, becomes a mask, because it explains what happened without ever explaining how it unfolded so precisely. Think about the timing. 6 teenagers in a pool, music loud, lights on, visible from across the lagoon. Then suddenly 4 figures appear, watching, waiting, and the moment attention shifts, they move, not hesitating, not scouting, not testing entry points. They commit, straight into the water, straight across, straight into execution. That's not opportunistic behavior. That's synchronization. That's planning, meeting timing. Which means one thing. They knew when to act. And if they knew when to act, then they knew when the house would be active, which contradicts the entire assumption. Because if the house was supposed to be empty, and they knew that, then why approach when people were clearly there? Unless the presence of people didn't change the plan. Unless the plan was designed to adapt. This is where most people stop thinking. They accept the surface explanation because it feels complete. But you're not here for surface explanations. You're here because something about this doesn't sit right. And it shouldn't. Because real control systems, whether in crime, institutions, or history, operate on layered intention. What you see is rarely the only objective. Maybe the valuables were always secondary. Maybe the real test was access, entry, movement, response time. Think about it. They revealed themselves. They allowed themselves to be seen. 4 figures standing still, making sure they were noticed. Why? Fear creates predictable behavior. Panic forces mistakes. Mistakes create openings. And what happened next? They rushed inside. They locked some doors, but not all. One access point, forgotten, left open. And whoever entered didn't rush, didn't search blindly. They walked, calm, measured, like they already knew exactly where to go. That's not guesswork. That's familiarity mapped onto action. And here's where it deepens. The boat. Not just taken, but used effectively, escaped with. Meaning whoever did this didn't just understand the house, they understood the water, the roots,
the regulations, the timing of patrols. That's not random criminals. That's embedded knowledge, the kind that exists quietly, inside communities, inside systems, inside places you assume are safe. So years pass, life moves on, doors get locked more carefully, memories get pushed down, because that's what people do. They adapt just enough to feel secure again. But the truth? It doesn't disappear. It waits, and sometimes it resurfaces. Not as closure.
Time didn't solve it. It buried it. That's what time does best. It layers distance over discomfort until the memory loses its sharpness, until it becomes a story instead of a warning, until you convince yourself that whatever happened was contained in the past. But patterns don't belong to time. They repeat, quietly, patiently, waiting for the right conditions to surface again. Years passed, lives separated, different cities, different routines, the kind of distance that convinces you you've escaped whatever version of yourself experienced that night. But you don't escape events like that. You carry them. In the way you lock your doors, in the way silence makes you uneasy, in the way your mind sometimes drifts back, not to remember, but to reanalyze. Because deep down, something never made sense. And when something doesn't make sense, it doesn't stay finished. It waits for completion. The reunion wasn't supposed to matter. Just another social ritual. Faces aged but familiar. Conversations shallow but comfortable. The past reassembled into something harmless. Until it wasn't. Because all it takes is one thread to pull everything back. Charles remembered. Not casually, not nostalgically, suddenly. Like something had been sitting just below his awareness, waiting for the right moment to break through. And when he spoke, it wasn't about that night. It was about something connected, something newer, something that didn't belong in coincidence. His younger brother, Kieran, 19, different generation, same location, same water. That alone should disturb you, because environments hold patterns, and whatever existed around that lagoon wasn't isolated to one event. It was still there, still active, still part of the system. Kieran and his friends made a decision that feels familiar. Rebellion, freedom, risk, taking the boat without permission, drinking where they shouldn't be, pushing boundaries because they believed consequences were manageable. That's how exposure begins, not through ignorance, but through overconfidence. They went further than they should have, anchored near an island where people aren't supposed to be, another restricted space, another overlooked boundary. And if there's one thing you need to understand, it's that restricted places aren't always restricted for the reasons you're told. Sometimes they're restricted because something there shouldn't be seen. The night fell, darkness expanded, and then they noticed it. Another boat, anchored nearby, unfamiliar, out of place, and yet strangely familiar, because Kieran recognized it, not vaguely, not uncertainly, immediately. The shape, the structure, the presence. He was convinced it was the same boat, the one that had been stolen years ago. Now think about that. A stolen object, never recovered, reappearing in a restricted location years later. That's not coincidence. That's continuity. That means whatever took that boat didn't disappear. It adapted.
It stayed within the system, hidden, unnoticed, until the wrong person looked too closely. And that's when the pattern started moving again. Because just like before, the moment they noticed something that shouldn't be there, something else noticed them. And once again, the line between observer and target began to disappear.
This is where most stories end. But this one doesn't give you that comfort, because there was no confrontation, no clear answer, no final reveal, only something far more dangerous: implication. Kieran and his friends swam toward the boat, closer, closer than they should have, close enough to confirm what his instincts were already telling him. It was the same boat, or at least something deliberately made to look like it. And then reality closed in. No phones, no evidence, no proof, just a decision to go back, to document it. That hesitation, that need for certainty, that's where control slips again. Because the moment they turned back, they weren't alone anymore. A man appeared on the shore, not walking casually, not minding his own business, moving toward them, faster, holding something, a shovel. Now stop and think. A restricted island, a hidden boat, and a man digging. That's not random behavior, that's purpose. And when he saw them noticing, he changed pace, from movement to pursuit. They ran, not because they understood everything, but because they understood enough. And that's all fear needs, enough. They reached the boat, escaped, but even then the system held. They couldn't speed away. Regulations, limits, controlled movement. Even in escape, they were restricted. And behind them, possibly something following, not confirmed, not visible, but present. That same pattern again, seen, then unseen, but never gone. They made it back, alive, untouched, but changed. And just like before, nothing came of it. No arrests, no recovery, no answers. The system closed the loop again, labeled, filed, forgotten. But you and I both know that's not the end. Because here's the truth most people aren't ready to accept. Some operations don't need to stay hidden, they just need to stay unbelieved. A stolen boat reappears years later in a restricted zone. A man digging in the dark, figures crossing water without hesitation, entry without panic, exit without trace, and no consequences. That's not luck, that's structure. That's something functioning beneath the surface, perfectly aware of how visible it can afford to be, and how invisible it remains. So now the question isn't what happened. The question is, how many times has it happened without anyone noticing? And more importantly, how many places like that exist right now, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the next group of people to believe they're alone? Lock your doors if you want. Turn on the lights. Stay where it feels safe. But understand this, safety isn't about where you are. It's about what's already been watching you before you ever realized you were visible.